want you to picture a scene. It's vivid, but also kind of distinctively beige and unfortunately very dark.
Okay.
You've got a man sitting in a Centrelink office. That's the Australian Social Security Administration.
Right.
He's 45 years old. He's under these fluorescent lights, worn out carpet all around. And the government has just handed him a piece of paper that, well, it effectively says, you are broken.
This is the disability pension approval. And for a lot of people, that's a lifeline, a moment of relief.
For sure. But for this man, it was basically a death sentence.
Yeah, because what he does next is, it's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. He doesn't go home and just, watch TV. He goes home, sits down at his computer, opens a blank Excel spreadsheet, and starts doing some very, very grim math.
The life expectancy file.
That's the one. He puts in his age, he puts in his diagnosis, which is bipolar II.
Okay.
And then he starts scouring the medical literature for the mortality rates.
And what does he find?
He finds that men with bipolar II lose, on average, somewhere between 11 and 15 years of life expectancy compared to everyone else.
Wow.
So being a precise kind of guy, he just splits the difference. He runs the formula. And the spreadsheet tells him he has exactly 17 years left to live.
That's just chilling. And it's not like he's doing it out of self-pity.
No, it's project management.
Right. He's planning his finances, his relationships, everything.
All reverse engineered from this date of obsolescence. He is literally planning his own death.
But here's the twist, and it's a huge one.
It is that file. It gets deleted years later. And not because he was magically cured of bipolar.
But because he never had it in the first place.
Exactly.
And that's the hook for the first book we're covering today, Misdiagnosed by Lee Hopkins. It turns out that for 30 years, the entire psychiatric system had been treating him for a mood disorder when he was actually ADHD.
Autistic and ADHD.
Right. He wasn't dying from a disease?
No. He was dying from the medication and, I guess, the lifestyle that was forced on him by a system that just couldn't read his dashboard.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. We're looking at 2 books by Hopkins today, Misdiagnosed, and his other one, The Augmented Psychologist.
And we're going to try to answer a really, really tough question. How does a medical profession fail so spectacularly that it convinces a man he's dying?
And this is the real curveball. How might artificial intelligence, of all things, be the only thing that can bring the humanity back into that profession?
Okay, let's just stop there for a second, because I can hear people listening, and frankly, myself, just asking, how?
How did this happen?
Yeah, Lee Hopkins isn't just a patient. He's a psychologist. He has 450 academic citations. I mean, he's an expert. How does an expert miss this in himself for 3 decades?
It's the ultimate case of the cobbler's children having no shoes, isn't it? But, Hopkins argues it's more than that. It's about symptom overlap. Psychiatry, it relies on observing behavior. And the problem is, a lot of different internal causes can look exactly the same from the outside.
So, give me an example, because to me, depression feels pretty distinct, Yeah. You're sad, you're lethargic, hopeless. How do you mix that up with autism?
Well, take the lethargy. Hopkins talks about being absolutely exhausted for decades, could barely get out of bed.
Right, and to a doctor, that screams major depressive disorder.
It checks the box. But Hopkins says it wasn't sadness, it was masking exhaustion.
Can you explain that term? Masking.
Yeah. So imagine you're a Mac computer. You're a really high-performance machine. But the entire world is running on Windows software.
Okay, I'm with you.
To function, you have to run an emulator. You have to translate every single input and every single output, all in real time.
But you can do it, but it's heavy on the system.
You can do it, but it eats up 95% of your RAM. Your fan is just spinning constantly. You're overheating. And eventually, the screen just goes black.
That is a great analogy.
So to the outside observer, the doctor, the computer's broken.
Yeah.
It won't turn on.
And that looks like depression.
Exactly. But the hardware is fine. It's just overheated from the sheer processing load of pretending to be normal.
And then you have the bipolar side of things, the mania. Bipolar is defined by those swings, right? The highs and the lows.
Right. So he had these crashes, which were labeled depressive episodes. But in reality, they were autistic shutdowns from sensory overload.
Okay.
And on the flip side, he'd have weeks where he would build an entire business from scratch. He wouldn't sleep. He was electric.
Which, that sounds exactly like hypomania. If a patient came to me and said, I haven't slept in 3 days and I just started 3 companies, I'd be reaching for the mood stabilizers.
You would. And that's exactly what his doctors did. But the distinction, and it's a really subtle one, it's the focus.
The focus.
Yeah. Mania is often scattered, it's grandiose, risk-taking without a real purpose. Hopkins was experiencing ADHD hyperfocus. He was locking onto his special interest. He was productive, not chaotic.
But because the behavior looked the same on the outside...
They gave him the bipolar treatment.
Yeah.
Exactly. He has this term for it. He calls it pharmacological furniture.
Oof. I highlighted that phrase. It's just brutal. Pharmacological furniture.
It really is. He says the mood stabilizers turned him into acceptable office furniture. He was beige, he was stable, he was upright.
But he was functionally lobotomized?
It's the word. He talks about running businesses and attending conferences, but feeling like an alien anthropologist. He was watching humans, but he couldn't feel like one.
And the whole time, he thought he was the problem, that the medication failing was his fault. So how did he figure it out? What was the moment?
It wasn't a test or anything. It was a conversation. And this happened really late in his life. He was 66 years old.
66. Wow. That is a lifetime of the wrong treatment.
It is. He was on a Zoom call with a psychologist friend who had seen him through all of it. And she just sort of paused and asked him, has it occurred to you that you might be neurodivergent?
Just like that. It's just like that. And it changed everything. He realized he wasn't a broken PC. He was a perfectly functional Mac trying to run PC software. The hardware was fine. The operating system was just different.
But before he had that big realization, he did something pretty drastic. He left the country.
Right.
And this brings us to what he calls the Vietnam shift. And I really want to dig into this because it challenges so much of what we think we know about mental illness.
It really, really does. So you have to remember, he's living on a pension at this point. He's broke.
Right.
So he moves to Alet in Vietnam, mainly for economic reasons. He could actually afford to live there.
But something happens to his brain when he gets there.
Something incredible. Within 3 months, the treatment-resistant depression that he'd had for 30 years.
Yeah.
Gone. Vanished. He says his photography returned to color. He literally started seeing the world as vibrant again.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Couldn't that just be the excitement of a new place, the, eat, pray, love effect? You might think so, but this stuck. And Hopkins argues that this is proof of the person-environment fit theory.
Which is?
Well, if moving countries cures your incurable biological mood disorder, you probably didn't have a chemical imbalance in the way we usually think about it.
You just had an environmental mismatch.
Exactly.
So what was it about Vietnam? Because honestly, Vietnam sounds chaotic, noisy, a lot of sensory input. For an autistic person, wouldn't that actually be worse?
That's the counterintuitive part. See, in Australia, the social expectations were rigid. He had to understand all these subtle cues, small talk, the unwritten rules.
Right.
In Vietnam, he was a foreigner, a barang.
And he gets a pass.
He gets a total pass. No one expected him to get the social nuance, so the pressure to mask it evaporated. He could just be himself, and people would just accept that he was a bit weird because, well, he's a foreigner.
So being an outsider actually set him free.
It completely removed the masking load. It's like taking a penguin out of the Sahara Desert and putting it back on an iceberg.
Yeah.
If the penguin suddenly stops acting sick, you don't say, wow, we cured the penguin. You say, we put it where it belongs.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. But it brings us back to that spreadsheet from the intro, the death calculation.
It does. And this is where Hopkins gets really sharp with his criticism of the whole industry.
Because his calculation was based on the stats for Bipolar II.
Right. But if he was misdiagnosed, how many other people in those reduced life expectancy studies were also misdiagnosed?
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought of that.
Hopkins calls them contaminated statistics. He suggests that the reduced lifespan might not be due to bipolar disorder itself. It might actually be measuring the lethality of misdiagnosis.
So we're not measuring how deadly the disease is. We're measuring how deadly it is to take a neurodivergent brain, force it to mask for 40 years, and just pump it full of sedatives it doesn't even need.
Exactly. The chronic stress of that mismatch, the cortisol, the self-loathing, the physical toll of the medication, that's what kills you, not the label.
That is genuinely terrifying. It means the very data foundations we're building treatments on might be cracked.
It just highlights the cost of getting this wrong. This isn't just about feeling better. It's about actual survival.
So we have this clear picture of the tragedy. A man misdiagnosed, medicated into numbness, planning his own death based on faulty data.
A total systemic failure.
And this is where we have to pivot to his second book, The Augmented Psychologist.
And I'll warn you, This is going to feel like a hard left turn.
It really does. We go from psychiatry, ruin my life, to, hey, let's all use AI.
Yep.
That sounds contradictory.
It does. Usually when people have a bad experience with the medical system, they want more human connection, not less, not robots.
Right.
But Hopkins' argument is that we need to look at the cause of the misdiagnosis.
Yeah.
Why did those doctors miss it? Was it because they were bad people?
Probably not. They were likely just overworked, burned out.
Exactly. Hopkins calls it the administrative avalanche.
The paperwork.
So much paperwork. The modern psychologist is just drowning in data entry. Notes, insurance claims, risk assessments, letters to GPs.
Yeah.
He argues that when you're drowning in admin, your cognitive load is maxed out.
And when you're maxed out, you stop being curious?
You stop spotting the weird patterns. You stop asking the interesting questions. You just look at the checklist.
Yeah.
Sad? Yes. Tired? Yes. Okay, depression. Next. Burnout kills empathy.
So his whole argument is that we need AI to save the humans from the paperwork.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he's really, really careful with his definition here. He is not talking about AI therapists.
Right. This isn't Dr. Chatbot diagnosing you from your phone.
No, not at all. He views AI as scaffolding. So think of it as a really efficient, slightly soulless paralegal or a fresh intern.
Okay.
Doesn't have a nervous system, doesn't have trauma, but it can write a referral letter in 4 seconds.
So by offloading the robot work to the actual robot, the human is then free to be, well, human.
That's the core thesis.
Yeah.
He gives this great example of using AI as a second brain, especially for neurodivergent clinicians.
Yeah.
If you have ADHD, executive function, just starting the task, that's the hardest part. Staring at a blank page is paralyzing.
I think that's true for everyone, neurodivergent or not.
For sure. But for Hopkins, he uses the AI as a starter motor. He just says, here are my rough notes, structure them for me, and suddenly the friction is gone.
He's not wasting his limited mental battery on formatting.
He's using it for actual clinical judgment.
He also talks about using it as a mirror. This part I found really interesting. He feeds his anonymized thoughts into the AI to check for blind spots.
This is fascinating because it's this contrarian take on empathy. The usual argument is that AI kills empathy because it's a machine.
Right.
Hopkins argues that exhaustion kills empathy. If you're burned out from writing 20 letters, you have nothing left for your client in the room. If the AI writes the drafts, you protect your energy. You can actually be present.
So the machine handles the logistics, so the human can handle the, what was the term he used? The metabolic stakes.
Metabolic states, I love that term. It means having a body, feeling pain, taking risks.
Having skin in the game.
Exactly. And AI can predict the next word in a sentence, but it doesn't know what it feels like to lose a parent or to be terrified of the future.
A machine can't sit in silence with a grieving person.
Only a human can do that.
Yeah.
But the machine can write the summary of the grief counseling session so the human can go home and actually sleep.
It's about rehumanizing the profession by outsourcing the drudgery.
That's it.
Okay, but we have to talk about the risks, because Hopkins brings his experience from the Vietnam shift into the AI discussion, and it highlights a massive blind spot in these tools.
This is the weird data problem. WEIRD.
Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
Basically, the AI is trained on the internet. And the internet, at least the parts these models scrape, is just dominated by English-speaking Western viewpoints.
Right, so what happened?
So Hopkins tested this. He's living in Vietnam, a culture that's deeply rooted in, collective harmony and saving face.
Yeah.
He asked an AI for relationship advice about a conflict with a Vietnamese friend.
And let me guess, the AI went full Dr. Phil on him.
It went full Western individualism. Set boundaries. Assert your needs. Be direct.
Which, to us sitting here, sounds like perfectly good advice.
To us, absolutely. But in Vietnam, that advice is a social grenade. If you assert your needs aggressively in a culture built on harmony, you don't just solve the problem. You burn the entire bridge. You lose face. It's catastrophic.
Hopkins had that funny line about it. He said, using AI translation without cultural context is like a tourist trying to order coffee and accidentally asking to boil my shoes.
It's a great image. But the implications are really serious. If a clinician just uses these tools blindly, they're basically colonizing their patients with Western bias.
But, and here's the classic Hopkins flip, he says this friction is actually a good thing.
How can bias be a good thing?
Well, because it forces the clinician to become a translator. You can't just copy-paste the AI's output. You have to look at it and say, wait a minute, that applies to a guy in New York, not a grandmother in a lot.
So you have to actively engage with the output, not just accept it.
Right. The very act of correcting the AI's cultural blindness makes you more culturally aware than if you just wrote it yourself on autopilot. It stops you from sleeping at the wheel.
I like that. It's not that
Mhm.
the tool is perfect. It's that the tool's imperfections force you to be sharper.
Exactly. It keeps you in the driver's seat.
So if we zoom out a bit here,
Hmm.
we started with a man in a beige office calculating exactly when he was going to die because a system mislabeled him.
And we end with that same man, not just alive, but thriving in Vietnam.
And making music. We can't forget that. He makes what he calls funk metal.
I still really need to hear this.
He describes it as music to slash your wrists by, turned into loud, defiant funk. It's just a testament to what happens when you finally find the right environment.
So what does all this mean for us, for you listening who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by your own administrative avalanche or just feeling like you don't quite fit in?
I think it means we have to stop looking at brains as broken just because they don't fit the standard mold. Hopkins wasn't broken. He was unsupported.
Mhm.
And secondly, maybe we need to stop being so afraid of tools that might help us fix the broken systems those brains are forced to live in.
It's a powerful message. We accept so much dysfunction, the burnout, the misdiagnosis, the admin overload, as just part of the job.
And maybe it doesn't have to be. We're so afraid of AI replacing us.
When maybe we should be more afraid of staying stuck.
Exactly. Staying stuck in systems that are actively hurting us.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've talked about how our diagnostic statistics might be contaminated and how our very human therapy is being compromised by burnout.
Yeah.
So ask yourself this. Are we actually afraid of AI replacing us? Or are we maybe afraid of AI revealing that we haven't been functioning at our full human potential for a very long time?
That is the uncomfortable question.